Dear Professor Dr. Thomas Rüde, dear Professor Dr. Ardi Marwan, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, good afternoon to you who are located in Europe. Good evening to those of you watching from Indonesia. Welcome to the 121st Sarasehan lecture of the Indonesian Embassy in Berlin with our guest speaker, Professor Dr. Thomas Rüde from the RWTH University in Aachen. Ladies and gentlemen, before we introduce our guest, Professor Dr. Rüde, I would kindly ask Professor Dr. Ardi Marwan, Education and Cultural Attaché of the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia in Berlin, to say some words of welcome. Bapak, silakan.
Terima kasih, Ibu Birgit. Thank you. Dear Professor Dr. Thomas Rüde, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, selamat datang. Welcome to our 121st Sarasehan lecture. Indonesia, dear guest, is one of the 3 partner countries of the German Ministry of Education and Research in Southeast Asia. The scientific and technological cooperation between our 2 countries dates back to 1979 and got especially close after December 2004, when the tsunami hit the coast of northwestern Indonesia. One of the outstanding German-Indonesian cooperation projects was the installation of an early warning system for the Indian Ocean that was jointly developed after this natural disaster caused the lives of thousands of people. Several priority areas have been fixed in the German-Indonesian Scientific and Technological Cooperation Agreement in 1979. Among those fields of geosciences, other cooperation areas that are mentioned are marine research, energy research, social sciences or humanities, for example, with recent focus on marine research and coastal protection. An outstanding cooperation project in the field of geosciences is currently GetIn-CICERO, which you, dear guests, will get to know in detail within this event. The thematic priorities of this project, environmental and water, sustainable georesources, geohazards, and coastal risks, and finally, energy and raw material efficiency are highly relevant for Indonesia, whose coastal areas are suffering under the pressure of climate change, dense settlements, and rising sea levels, whose drinking water resources are at risk, and whose hunger for energy remains constantly high. More than that, the Center for International Research will be of importance not only for Indonesia, but for the whole region of Southeast Asia. Dear Professor Dr. Rüde, it is a great pleasure for me that you are with us today in order to introduce the significant example for a successful German-Indonesian cooperation project to us. I am especially interested in what happened and still happens to GetIn-CICERO at the moment during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm afraid the works had to be stopped, like so many projects that are currently lying idle. And I hope that you will tell us today that work will be resumed again soon. I'm very much looking forward to your presentation, Professor Rüde, and I finally wish us all an inspiring afternoon. Terima kasih, Bu Birgit. Now back to you.
Terima kasih, Bapak. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Ardi Marwan. Ladies and gentlemen, Thomas Rüde has been full professor for hydrogeology at the Rheinisch-Westfälische Technische Hochschule in Aachen since 2005. Besides that, he is rector's delegate for the cooperation with Indonesia. Professor Rüde started his career at the University of Karlsruhe, now KIT, in hydrogeology and geochemistry. His PhD thesis is focused on arsenic in the environment, and for postdoc, he worked on geogenic arsenic, heavy metal release from steel slags, natural attenuation of contaminated aquifers, and regional groundwater systems. Let us warmly welcome Professor Dr. Thomas Rüde. The screen is yours, Professor Rüde.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Stefan. Terima kasih. And also my thanks and gratitude to dear Professor Ardi Marwan for the invitation to this talk and for the opportunity to present today something about our research we are doing since a couple of years I'm representing a group of colleagues, and the long-lasting relationship of RWTH with universities in Indonesia has also its expression nowadays, so that our rector has appointed me to be his delegate for the cooperation with Indonesia. So it's a development in our activities which has now installed Indonesia as a very important activity of this leading technical university, the RWTH in Southeast Asia. So it's really a pleasure to have a chance to talk about this. And I'd like also to welcome from my side all the people listening to this presentation. Selamat sore to the Europeans and Germans. And if you are joining this presentation from Indonesia, I'd like to say this Selamat malam, and have hopefully a nice evening event and a good start into the end of this day. Okay, so I will start my presentation. And this gives you a bit of a way to see this thing. So my presentation will introduce to you this activity, which is abbreviated as GetIn-CICERO. GetIn-CICERO stands for German-Indonesian Geo-Campus. So geosciences are the starting field of research for this campus. That you will see later. We are in many topics far beyond geosciences in the development of this joint activity between RWTH Aachen and the Indonesian colleagues. The idea is to have activities in Indonesia for education and research, and the vision is that we can contribute to the needs of society, to the request from industry and also from administrative bodies with an advice in research topics and joint development of products which can help our both societies to tackle the coming challenges. So I will split my talk in the next 45 minutes into 4 blocks. The first one is a bit introducing to you the GetIn-CICERO network and the structure of these activities and the fields of activities. And then I will give you on 3 examples a bit more closer look on what does that mean, a network of joint research, joint education approaches between RWTH and our Indonesian friends and partners at Universitas Gadjah Mada and other places in Indonesia. This is an example coming from the coastal area of Semarang in the northern section, the center of the northern coast of Java. You see here in this northern circle. When I will move to the special province of Yogyakarta with a short comment on developments in Surabaya, and the last topic will deal with the waste from electronic and electrical equipment and our common efforts for circular economy of these scrap. Okay. Today I'm based on a deep-rooted friendship and cooperation between RWTH. You know that your late President Habibie was a scholar of RWTH and alumni of RWTH, but also in hydrogeology. We have a long-lasting cooperation with friends in Indonesia dating back in the 1980s. My predecessor, Horst Robert Langgut, was a scientist from Germany who started very early with intense cooperation and research in Indonesia. You see a couple of people who did the PhD at RWTH Aachen under his supervision and became later scientists and university teachers in Indonesia. I followed up this tradition with own PhD candidates, Univ together with my friend Ravi Assan and Thomas Butranto, who also both are nowadays professors at universities in Indonesia. So there's a long-lasting exchange between these people. And you see on the top, I have written, this is a bottom-up process, what you see later, that we have these roots. Even in the time in between Hauswart Langert and myself, there was still a cooperation between the geosciences and institutes in Indonesia. Alefudin Idros and Donatos Hendra are both now professors in petroleum sciences and in economic geology, and they did the PhD here at my faculty in the geosciences in 2005. So you see, this is also something in between. There's not only hydrogeology, it's a complete faculty of georesources and material engineering, which I'm representing today, which is the platform for these activities leading to GetIn-CICERO. And then the German Ministry of Education and Research did a call for proposals in 2016. We had already this long tradition and also a formal memorandum of understanding for our cooperation, which was signed in 2013. So you see from this broad traditional contact of people, we were more and more developing now into a structured activity. So this is a good example of how a bottom-up process can work, based on friendship of people, and then we are increasing and now joining our activities in a more structured way. And the call of the BMBF was going into establishing joint research presences in Southeast Asia. And one of the possible countries were Indonesia, and we were lucky to win one of the contracts to establish the GetIn-CICERO competence network at the Universitas Gadjah Mada as our local platform, but extending into the cooperation also with other universities in Indonesia and beyond. Because you know that Indonesia is the leading country in the ASEAN network, and the University of Gadjah Mada is a host for academic cooperation, coordinating this also for the other universities from ASEAN states. So when I'm working in Indonesia, I learned also new colleagues from Vietnam, from Laos, from Thailand. So it's indeed a spreading network. We have cooperation at the moment between two faculties, but are on the way to discuss to extend this to a cooperation of both universities. There is an office of the GetIn-CICERO. GetIn-CICERO often means a permanent office of RWTH Aachen at the University of Gadjah Mada, and we do have also a permanent laboratory. The vision of this cooperation is that we get some platform which enables joint cooperation, joint projects, and also exchange of students, of PhD candidates, and to foster our cooperation for the benefit of both societies. Let me give you one idea, short introduction to the structure of my faculty, so that you will understand the next slide about the activities of GetIn-CICERO. My faculty is working and researching along a cycle from deposits to raw materials and products. So we have the geosciences, including social geography, economic geography, climate research. We have our mining engineers and specialists in circular economy, and as you see, also material engineers, metallurgical scientists who are dealing with the question, what are the products we are in need for the future? And with this diagram, maybe you will understand why GetIn-CICERO do have such a broad focus in the possible activities. We are structured at the moment along 4 clusters, and each cluster has a cluster responsible person, and these are always a colleague from RWTH and a colleague from University of Gadjah Mada joining in this activity. We have this with regular meetings of the coordinating committee and these cluster leads, so to give also some input to coming activities. And we know that these 4 clusters in the coming years are maybe not the end of the story, that we will enlarge to other topics. Environment and water. Such a title, I have 3 bullet points below that to give you a bit more understanding what does that mean in our research. We are looking for water resources. We are discussing about the benefit of artificial recharge and managed aquifers. We are dealing with emergent pollutants in the aquatic environment. That is done by my colleagues since many years. The tsunami early warning system was already mentioned by Professor Marwan, and from our part as geoscientists, we are still on in debate with our colleagues at University of Gadjah Mada about early warning, for example, for the lahars. These are these deposits from the volcanoes after the eruption, the fine material, the ashes falling down, and after a heavy rain, after monsoon, we have these big avalanches traveling from the volcanoes downhill. Normally they are in some gullies, so you have a precise position where they will hit the lower lands, but in bad circumstances, it could also be that they are spreading farther than expected. So at the Gadjah Mada University, there's also a Center for Disaster Research, which is in cooperation also internationally, and we are contributing to that with expertise in these early warning systems, and also with the tsunami record. What is the histories of tsunamis? And that is always recorded in the sediments. When we are investigating sediments, we get also understanding what was history hundreds of years ago about the tsunami, and to learn about that. What could be the size of a tsunami in a specific area? And the 4th cluster here, and you see mine for the future, is something our economic geologists and mining engineers are doing. What are the processes we have to implement that mines are not only successful in the productive period, but that we have also a clue about the coming years after mine closure and how to proceed with that, what is learned in the decades. It is very interesting interchange because, you know, Indonesia is a very active mining country, very important for the international supply of raw materials. In Germany, we are more now in the phase to phase out existing mining, especially the underground mining is now restricted only to salt mining. But we gathered a lot of experience over decades, what will be the effect of former mining, even over in the scale of hundreds of years. You know, we are still on remnants from Roman time, and by that we can evaluate what is in the long run the environmental effect on the scale of 2000 years, you know, of such mining activities. And the last cluster is about energy, especially geothermal energy. That is our expertise, and tailor-made implants, and also the recycling of the VEEE scrap and lithium-based scraps. I will come back to that also a bit later. Besides this research, we have also, as I said, installed a laboratory. This laboratory means that we were able to buy equipment here in Germany, which is serving a broad range of needs from all these different activities. These are instruments, after discussing that with the Indonesian colleagues, that these instruments are really closing gaps in the existing options. And the purpose was known only for the laboratory, but also for field measurements. And as you see, something like an intuitive handling and a feasible operation and maintenance costs. So we were a bit reluctant to invest in one machine of 1 million euros, and then it's very costly to keep this machine running. So this is more instruments which are done in a way that this laboratory has a long future in the coming years, yeah, to work precisely and to serve the needs of all our colleagues. Also, the University of Gadjah Mada had contributed to the setup of that laboratory by new facilities. You see here one of the rooms. There are also further rooms for sample preparation. They installed interruptible power supply, power and gas supply, and also air conditioning for these rooms in the humid climate of Java that is indispensable need. And joining our both efforts, we were really successful in bringing this laboratory in 2018 to run. Due to COVID, the access from the German side is indeed interrupted, but we have the link to our colleagues in Indonesia who are still on using this laboratory. And as the government of Indonesia has announced also this month, please, our foreign scientists look on ways how the Indonesian colleagues can do the research in Indonesia, and then you will discuss about the data. And then we are talking about research, and needs also a legal framework. We worked through several contracts and also about contracts regulating the exchange of data, the ownership of data. So we are in a good way that we are implementing the necessary legal network for such cooperative work of scientists in Indonesia. I have two slides just to give you an idea, not about the machinery in detail, but this is a bit to impress why we have these instruments, what are the fields we like to investigate, to have a facility for more or less to measure all the elements of the periodic system. This is helpful for environmental research, for mining research, for mine deposits, for metallurgical processes, things which are dealing with carbon and sulfur, so that we know, for example, sulfur content in slags or metallurgical products, which is very critical for the use of such items, or for we say carbon in organic waste, so that we can a bit discuss if we can use organic waste, for example, for methane production, and then use this methane for energy production. So you have a machine which was the first in Southeast Asia installed in 2018, where you can just put in organic waste and then you get an answer about the carbon content, very quick time and very precise. And also for liquids, nitrogen and organic carbon contact and inorganic carbon, which can be used for environmental studies, pollution to aquifers, pollution to surface waters. And the second slide on that gives you further equipment also used for the field. The scanner can be used for mapping complete walls, for example, in an open pit. And from such data, you can produce models about fractures and openings and joints in such a wall, usable for calculating the wall stability, so that you have not an unintended movement of such a wall into the open pit operation. Same is for road cuts. You need this stability calculation, and science using such scanner in the field is a modern way to contribute data to such calculation and modeling about slope stabilities. And you see other equipment useful for hydrogeology, cave investigations about the flow path of groundwater that is based on tracers. And we had already set up discussions in 2020 to do joint research in caves together with our colleagues of geography at the Gadjah Mada University. But everything is now interrupted because of the COVID pandemic. Anyway, in 2019, there was a big chance, and it was a nice event that we had started with educating the already graduated students, master students and PhD students in a joint field camp, and the friends at the University of Gadjah Mada were able to organize a field camp for 8 nations. 12 universities were contributing with lecturers, not always all at the same time, but in the long run of more than 2 weeks of these field camp, everyone has shown up, and we had up to 15 students who were 2 weeks together doing field research, also a bit enjoying the friendship and the hospitality of the people of Indonesia. We traveled a bit across Java from different parts, and for sure, when you have visited Java for people from foreign countries, the Bromo side is something you have to see and you have to be there. Even then it was a bit more active than usual. But also for people in the business, in the industry, we are offering a service of special workshops where they can improve knowledge, but we can also do some more links and exchanging ideas. You see here a succession of academic workshops, mostly 1 week, we have done from the beginning on in different fields: environmental investigations, remote sensing, asset mine range for the mining industry, for the groundwater business, groundwater modeling. And the last one was already only done by online, but many people from companies, also from Indonesia, have enjoyed these online opportunity with 120 participants. It was a very successful workshop about the metal recycling, which was done by our colleagues from the metallurgical sciences, together with the support of the metallurgical scientists of University of Gadjah Mada. Yeah, and luckily we have joint PhD projects which are still on running, even in the time of the pandemic, when the Germans were not able to see our field sites since spring last year. Still on, we are discussing chances to go, but I guess that everything is still on delayed until autumn, so it will 1 to 1.5 years of not being on site, but some things can be done remote, satellite data, and as I said, some things can also be done by the support of Indonesian partners to take samples in the field, to measure in the laboratory and to send the data. So one work is dealing with groundwater resources. Another is about the paleoseismicity and active tectonics in the Yogyakarta area. We have a work on rock drainage in the Reta Island. This is in the framework of mine closure and mine of the future. This is an already now finished PhD project close to a publication, which was dealing with reef systems, especially as a sink for indicators of anthropogenic activities. Microplastic was encountered in these reef sediments, so we get a bit of historical record about the start of such a plastic pollution in the reef environment. And another new activity is dealing with the recycling of rare earth elements, neodymium, from battery scrap and magnets. So this is something very important to join with each other. These PhD processes are jointly advised, so it means from RWTH and from Universitas Gadjah Mada, we have supervisors for the students. In some cases, we have also people coming from, for example, LIPI, giving advice, and from other German universities like University of Kiel. Funding of these PhD projects is also split. The first two are funded by RWTH. The next, the third and the fourth is funded by LIPI. And there's also now a PhD project which is funded by DAAD. So we have a very lively network of different activities, also with respect to funding opportunities and the cooperation of different people and different sciences. So time is running, a bit lengthy talking, so I hope that I can now a bit keep up the schedule as planned. And I will go into the 3 examples a bit to highlight for you our activities, a bit more to explain the intentions. And these are 3 examples on different levels. One is indeed a research project we had discussed with local authorities, with the people from the Central Java government, and our partners are from the Diponegoro University. At the moment, we are a bit struggling for funding opportunities. We have tested several possibilities. As I said, it's a good concept I will introduce to you, but it is not a yet started project. So you have an impression of the city of Semarang in the central north of Java, a very important harbor and industrial place. The main harbor is shown here in the center, but you see here on the left and the right, this building on the left is already dismantled. I saw this in 2015 and 2017, already gone. And in the old part of Semarang, the old city part, it's a common situation that the houses are sinking into the underground. And there's a common saying that each generation has to build up one floor on top of the older floor when it's sinking into the underground. I picked up this diagram from a study of Deltaris, the huge Dutch consultants agency. It's based on several publications, and you will find in the science also other publications with the same story. It's a big misunderstanding that sea level rise is always the result of an active rise of the sea. Often it is a sinking of the land, a subsidence. You see that very clearly in this diagram. Here the red line is the global sea level rise, which is established at time in the range of 20 centimeters globally. There are reports from the Java Sea, published this year, indicating that we have in the last decade a decline of the sea level in the Java Sea by 3 millimeters. Whatever you are discussing, this is something we are dealing in the millimeters to centimeter range. And you see the subsidence for several coastal urban agglomerations. We are dealing with meters. The first example is Tokyo, and Tokyo has stopped this subsidence by a very rigorous management program for aquifers of water injection and managed aquifers. It was not able to rise again, but to stop the process. But you see many other examples all around Southeast Asia. It's not only Jakarta, it's also Semarang and other places, and also in other countries. A very common problem that in the coastal regions, the cities are sinking. When the result, indeed, you will have still a rising amount of water which is flooding into the cities, but the ways we should discuss how to mitigate that, how we make our cities more resilient against these effects. That should be different, because the reasons for the processes are based onshore in the city areas. It's not the global effect of sea level rise as an active increase. Why do we have such huge declines, especially in cities in Southeast Asia? I mean, you maybe know examples from Central Valley in California or from Mexico City and other places where you find similar things, but it is a very special situation that so many of the mega cities which are placed in Asia, especially in Southeast Asia, have these high subsidence rates. And one reason is that the sediments are quite young. As a geologist, we are talking about a few million of years, but as a young sediment, it's not compacted. This natural process is not finished. And now we are putting cities on top. So we have an extra load on this compaction process. In some areas, also like Semarang during the Dutch imperial period, Dutch colonialism, we also put in new strips enlarging the city area to the north by sand deposits. These are what I call the technogenic sediments, which are not compacted at the moment, not completely. And then anticipating a subsidence, sometimes people also start to build very high streets with extra dams to have power plants on platforms. But even that is causing an extra load. Beside the original building, we have these 1.50 meter high platforms, which are already installed when we are anticipating future subsidence. We should not forget about geological reasons, tectonical regions. In some debates, it's really going to the debate of mantle effects. That means from structures in the earth which are more than 50 or more than 80, 100 kilometers deep. And further aspect is depressurization of the aquifers. Depressurization means when we are pumping off the water, we are lowering the water pressure inside the aquifer. So the water which is between the grains, and then we are limiting or lowering this pressure, the grains will more compact. And when many grains are doing this, you will see a subsidence in the range of meters. The example of Semarang I have picked up also because Semarang is at the moment the city in Southeast Asia with the highest rates of subsidence. It's well known in science since many years. There were different studies on that. A very often cited study was going back to colleagues. Colleague Kühn was now retired. You see, they evaluated satellite data. All these dots are single spots. They use satellite data to evaluate the land subsidence. In the red zone, this is going indeed in the range of meters, yeah, of subsidence. Centimeters. Centimeters in a quite short period. 8 centimeters and up to 20 centimeters. And you see here the pressure lines for the groundwater, and the extraction of groundwater is the highest in areas of highest subsidence. And it was also demonstrated by Thomas Botranto in his PhD research, that we have record on several tens of meters of decline in piezometric head, that means in the pressure head of the aquifers. Let me say, as a hydrogeologist, when we are extracting water, which is normal, we need to depressurize the system to get water out, but it should be on some limit and should not be in a way where it is decline. And then the subsidence also is starting to become a serious effect. For Semarang, there is a master plan to deal with these problems. And out of that, there is a classification of so-called flood scenarios. And the colleagues are distinguishing two types. One flooding is coming from the sea. When the city is lowering, you will have more spring tides, more high tides affecting the land. And there's a section you see here is the industrial harbor, the whole section, and also the airport of Sema located in this area, which could be influenced by flooding from the sea because land is so low. And we have a second effect coming from inland. After heavy rains in the mountains, all the rivers are going to the north. And with the subsidence of cities, you will get a problem in the dewatering systems, your sewer system, which is installed to divert water to the north to the sea. With subsidence, all your pipes will get more and more flat. And if a steep pipe is getting flat, for sure, flow velocity is getting less. The amount of water which can be transported by the pipe system is getting less. And in the result, we have more and more sections which are at risk to become flooded. And there's a huge system in Semmering of pumps installed to pump off the water to the coast. But even with that, after heavy rains, often it is not enough capacity installable to divert all this water to the north. Our idea, when you see also here an effect for the water quality with all these water coming from the sea, there's a huge section in Semmering where the flat, the upper aquifer, cannot be used anymore by the people because the water is getting very salty. It's sometimes very close to seawater composition. So, and that is a further problem, not only on quantity, but also on the quality of the water. What we have discussed as one possible measure, beside all the other activities, building high dams in the mountains, one is already installed, having huge canals to the coast for diverting the water, that we can take up some of this water from the canals during rainy season. That is a storm water harvesting. Maybe we have a bit to treat this surface water to become it appropriate for injecting it by deep wells into the aquifer. So that we are repressurizing these aquifer, at least to stop the subsidence. There is already other measures set up by the city authorities. For example, new regulations about areas where you're allowed to do new wells, where you're allowed to extract water. But this could be a further measure to help to mitigate the situation and to make the city of Semmering more resilient against coming effects. Short introduction to the second example, which is a running PhD project in Gunung Sewu, in the special province of Yogyakarta and beyond, about possibilities for new water resources. The Gunung Sewu is very known for its tropical karst features, and you see it could be very productive, very fruitful, a lot of agriculture is taking place. But it has also problems in dry season, that a lot of cars are traveling around. Last year, the people were really depending on supply by the regional government to bring fresh water into the villages for the daily needs of the people. It can get very dry in the karst period. Yogyakarta is the CTP site that area. And you see here some data about Yogyakarta, about the connectivity of people to drinking water pipes and also with sewer systems. And the problem here, you see that in this example, often the dug well for the water supply is very closely placed to the bathhouse and to the toilet. And that is always the problem in the long run when people are depending on the local septic tanks, that you are introducing bacteria into the underground and other pollutants like phosphorus, like nitrogen, like organic carbon, and that is changing the chemical condition of the aquifer into a bad situation. And we see that in some data we have worked out together with Professor Putra in a research Univ Prof did, and it is close to be published. You see here the nitrate values, and then you see a threshold for nitrogen in water is 12 milligram per liter nitrogen. If you're more familiar with nitrate in Germany, this is equal to 50 milligrams per liter. So you see a lot of points, especially in the city area, are far above this threshold, indicating this nutrient load into the aquifer. And for future development of the city, which is of concern. There is, just as a number, a lot of water available in that region, in the aquifers. You see the need in the city of 8 million, roughly 8 million cubic meters per year, or 90 million in the whole province, is only 1/10 of the natural resource. But much of this water is too deep or is now in contamination. So we were discussing what can be done else. We can a bit work on the need of water to improve irrigation, because agriculture is one of the main users of groundwater, reducing the demand in other sectors, that you can maybe build up further dams. Dams will always consume surface area, and they have high evaporation rate, and they are sensitive towards becoming silted. The fines are deposited in the dam side. Maybe harvesting of rainwater could be a contribution, and to look to further resources. And further resources are maybe in the Gunung Sewu area. The Gunung Sewu area is shown here. It is beyond the district limit of the province of Yogyakarta. A huge karst plateau means a limestone area. And in this area, this is the first time that we have a map of the complete region, which was done by Univ Prof using a lot of different data sources to compile this map, so that you have a complete overview of this. And you see Yogyakarta quite close to that. And here's an evaluation of data about dolines and research in the past, done also by colleagues from the Karlsruhe University, about karst caves and the flow of water in the underground. So a lot of water is flowing into big springs at the coast. And this Gunung Sewu area has indeed a huge amount of water available. And that was already discussed in the beginning of this century by colleagues of University of Karlsruhe. And they set up this hydropower plant at the Breiving karst cave. You see a few figures here. There is the cage to go down 120 meters down into the karst cave, where this power plant is installed. The idea is to produce electricity for pumping up all this water. Because use of groundwater in karst areas, all the problem is we do have a lot of water, but in great depth. It's not running on the surface. So you have to pump up the water, and that is costly. And a nice idea would be to produce the electricity on site and then to pump up. This site is in operation since 2011, but has a lot of interruptions. I took my photographs here in 2013, and even at that time, it was still not working. And the last I heard is that there's again an interruption. Because in the karst cave, you have huge changes in the volume which is flowing through. I know that from my research, it could go in a few days from 0 to, let me say, 10, 12, 15 cubic meters per second. And that causes a huge change in pressure on all these pipes in the power plant. And the problem is that the links between the pipes are getting broken, and then there's interruption. Next point is the high humidity. In a karst cave, you have close to 100% humidity. A lot of electrical equipment is not designed for 100%. It is good for 95%. So you need special equipment, which is often not on the local market. You have to import, and you need time to install these things. So our idea is, again, from this starting point, they had set up a network for extracting water from these from a brewing case to go into a network. But with all these interruptions in pumping up the water, also the network is not in a good condition. And in many places, the people are now again, or still on, depending on trucks bringing water in small portions. Our research about the resource, what is the amount of water inside, and you see a first estimate, but it is the first estimate. You be careful about this number, but roughly it is going to 680 million cubic meters for a whole site. And our research is now a bit looking where the water is flowing. Where are good points where we can maybe catch a lot of water in a single outflow at the coast, so that we can install common, normally used equipment for water plant, also maybe for hydropower plant or for other devices to generate electricity, and from there to pump up the water. This is not unknown. There are examples in the Dinaric, in the around the coast in the Adriatic area, for example, the so-called city of Rüde, giving name to such outflows of karst water into the ocean. There it's a huge area where spring is catched and then water is pumped up. The advantage in comparison to such a cave installment is that we have better control about the situation. We have better possibilities to set up the space and to install long-distance water supply for some areas in Gunung Sewu area district, but also to Yogyakarta if we need that. And this is not the first time that a long-distance water supply for an urban area is discussed. So our work is now, as I said, on this resource. Is it available and where? Before we go into the next step. You know, we have also in Germany a long-distance water supply from Bodensee, Lake Constance, to the north of Württemberg. We're also up to 300 meters in height have to be worked out. And the actual project or example in Indonesia is the new water supply to Surabaya coming from the Umbulan spring, which was opened in this March by President Joko Widodo in an opening speech. You see here the installed power plant. So water from the Umbulan spring is now going into the areas on a rate of 126 billion cubic meters. So such installations are feasible. They are demonstrated. We have to look for good places to make it cost effective, but the techniques themselves, they are available. Our task as geoscientists is now to look on the resource and where to place such activities. I'm sorry, but I'm a bit running out in my time, but I like to give you a short words about the third example, and I hope that you will stay together with me and the others a few minutes to listen on that before we go into the discussion. That is about the circular economy and the activities we are doing together with the colleagues at the University of Gadjah Mada, where it's also a national hub for research in lithium battery recycling So it makes sense that we are joining in this topic. You see an example from batteries, which are now a topic for our new ways of mobility. It's the crucial part in the future individual transport systems. And in such a battery, we have a lot of metals included, and a circular economy would mean that we are trying to recycle this as best as possible. Especially lithium is really on concern. On this map, you see that lithium is limited to a few countries which are feeding the needs of the world societies of the peoples. And it has also effect on lithium prices, which has tremendously risen in a couple of years, because we are limited to a few deposits to feeding us. So closing this circle is really mandatory for our development in all societies. And this is going to the circular economy. You see just the word that at RWTH, our course in metallurgical sciences have a complete network of institutes and also companies dealing with chemical treatment, metallurgical treatment, but it's not only based here in Aachen, but is an expression of a network, what is called the green metallurgic. Companies and people and institutes joining in such a network, which is organized by our colleagues from metallurgical engineering, to go into this circular economy also for electronic scrap and for batteries. I will a bit skip this slide to keep in time, but to impress you this, what the challenge is. We have a couple of metals with very good circular economy. A good part is already recycled, but you see also here in red metals where the weight is still on below 10%. And that is from us as scientists, the challenge, how we can increase the weight of recycling these metals to close the loop, and what is needed in collecting these materials and how we can proceed in the technical processes for recycling it. So the idea is that at the end that we have at least very few waste produced to conserve the environment and also to save energy and natural primary resources so that we can extend the livelihood of our deposits, the known deposits. And it will have also a climate effect, because in the circular economy, the energy needs are less in comparison to mining of primary resources. So there's a good part that we can also reduce the CO2 budget by more recycling facilities. And that is good for all the countries, also Indonesia and also Germany. We have very ambitious targets in the coming years for CO2 reduction. And I give you a final example. What does that mean from the point of metallurgical processes and from research we have to do together with our colleagues in Indonesia? You see this the typical process that we have to collect the scrap, that we are preconditioning it when it is going into some appropriate metallurgical recovery. Also this stage where you can optimize energy need, new energy resources maybe, in comparison to traditional sources, and then you have some things you can process. And such lobes are more or less incomplete when you are looking on special elements. Here is an example for electronic scrap. Copper, cobalt is very fine. We can more or less completely recycle to give it again into metals. But with tin, lead, we have already losses into the slag, into the flue dust. And with lithium or tantalum, you see we have indeed more or less no way at the moment to recycle that, to get it out in an economic and environmental feasible way, not to invest too much energy into this cycle. And that is still on the challenge for coming years to improve such process of circular economy. So, final 3 slides from my point. After this example about running activities in the GetIn-CICERO network, I like a bit to look into the coming months and activities, and we are really looking forward that the change in the pandemic, the situation in all the countries will allow us again a bit more of activities jointly together in presence in Indonesia. I should say personally, I'm really missing my travels to Indonesia since last year. Nothing was for my last visit was in autumn 2019. But let us be optimistic that maybe we can do in autumn a workshop on circular economy together with our partners, with tendencies from the industry and from research institutions in presence in Yogyakarta. If that is not feasible, we will do it digitally, but we hope really for presence. And we are already now in preparation for an event next March, meeting of alumni of DID and RWTH in Indonesia, in Yogyakarta, and a conference, German-Indonesian talk on research for society. What are the next challenges, where we should go, what are the needs, what is the scene set up by both governments, as urgent points, so that we enlarge our network, and we hope to do that in Yogyakarta. The preparation is ongoing. We have already booked our place, and please keep this day if you like to come to this place. And we also invite the young scientists, the master students, PhD students to take part in the young scientist panel in next March, hopefully in presence, but for sure as a strategy B in online. But that will something I like to invite every one of you, if you're interested, to take part in these activities. For today, I like to acknowledge the help of two persons beside others who did some slides and prepared that for me and or allowed me to use this in this presentation. Nina Kempfner, who is PhD in my group, and Dr. Alexander Bierich from our Metallurgical Institute, who gave me some of the slides on out of that workshop they did in last year digitally. Yeah, for all of you, I like to say terima kasih for your listening, for joining today. I hope that you will have a nice evening, stay in good health through these days. I say selamat tinggal to you, and this is a nice place maybe for all of us a bit to think about good days which will come, that we can also enjoy again the hospitality and friendship in the nice areas in Indonesia, especially now with these cold days in Germany. Have this look. This is in Lombok, Uta Lombok, and it's a nice place. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Professor Rüde. Do we have any questions from our audience? I remember when I lived in Surabaya until the end of 2016, there was no collection system for old batteries. And I always felt so bad when I had to throw my used batteries in the common waste bin, because we know that it is so poisonous, yeah. And also the the light bulbs. We also had to throw them just away with the common waste. I don't know how it was later in Svan. You lived in Jakarta. Was there any collection of those kinds of waste?
Actually, there was, but at the embassy. But I don't know where they put the old batteries from there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's now a start that people are becoming more aware, also not only about the environmental negative effects, but also about the wealth which is still on such a battery, when we try to recycle that. And especially not to export these things, but to recycle them on-site, so that we have less CO2 emission by transporting the things. And yeah, I think it will help the people to get more aware when you have this load. You see, this is my battery, I place in the place, and there is the company collecting it, and then in the next bigger city, they are recycling that. So I have a more closer feeling to this. And I guess this is something to start with the young children on school, to train them, to make some awareness about that. So it's still a long way to go. If we are saying something about school children. When we start to discuss with our Indonesian colleagues about joint research, it is indeed a problem now at the starting. Where do we have this electronic scrap? Who is collecting that? What is the amount of electronic scrap available in Indonesia for recycling? And for some facilities, you need a minimum of supply to set up such, for example, metallurgical oven. So that needs, I think, also people participation, stakeholder participation, to say that what we can do as universities is to show the way how we can handle this to make a secondary product, a product which is not a decline in usability, but to keep the level which is already set into some electronic devices. And with metals, often that is quite feasible, that you keep metals in a range of circular economy which is very high. It's not like in the paper circulation that you are decreasing with every step of circulation. But it needs, on the other side, some further steps to collect it. I think now we are a lot of debates in all the societies about plastic collection. Also, Germany has started some projects in Southeast Asia to support collecting systems. I hope that this will have some side effects. When people are getting more, we're collecting here, we're collecting there. In Germany, sometimes I think we are now a bit overdone with the collection. People say, collecting and splitting and so many different bins to put things in. But that is for me a point of a challenge, which is not win on one point. We have always to keep the people aware about the needs, to train again and to push them. Please stay with this. And if we are not training and advertising this, we will start again to become a bit lazy about this.
Do you work together with local non-governmental organizations who, as far as I know, these small grassroots organizations in Indonesia who start installing collecting systems, for example, or who start educating children? And it's as far as I know, in Indonesia, it's coming from the society, out of the society more than from top down. Do you have any cooperations with those?
In that network of universities at this moment, no. We know a little bit. We're doing events in Yogyakarta. Also people from different NGOs, from grassroots organizations were showing up. Small talk, but there is not a formal, let me say, a running activity at this time on that research. This is also the point that we are coming as guests from Germany, and I think if our colleagues in Indonesia at the ITB in Bandung or the University of Indonesia in Jakarta, or the people in Yogyakarta, even Surabaya, are inviting us to cooperate on that level. We are open to that, but I see us as scientists, we are at this moment dealing with the education of our students, with the education of the PhDs, and we try to get projects running. And doing such things, I have the feeling, especially when I'm looking on the example in Semarang, it was very open in the administrative bodies, in the government of a province, in the local city authorities, to support such activities. And then you have this link with local people, and we all know that students in Indonesia, they have to go also into the small villages for some period, and I hope that they will bring such ideas also into local places. But also see this activity not in the first level for our GetIn-CICERO.
you spoke about workshops you offered for the industry, and you had a lot of participants. You said 120 people. Were those people more from local small and medium enterprises, or were they more stuff out of large international industries that are active in Indonesia?
There is a bit changing with the topics we have done so far.
Okay.
As I said, we have these different clusters. The idea was, at least now with the starting years of GetIn-CICERO, that every cluster is also doing at least one of the workshops, and then we will see the needs and how often we will continue these workshops. When I did the workshop on acid mine drainage, there were people coming from mines, also from Malaysia, and also from other islands like Kalimantan. There were a lot of people coming from Kalimantan. Some of them were related to international mining companies like Newman Mining. But there were also people from local authorities, from research centers, and from other universities. So when we did this metallurgical workshop in last October, which was completely online, it was indeed a thing now for people very comfortable to join that. So the tendency of 120 was the largest we ever had. The other workshops are 30, 40. When you are dealing with modeling, when everyone is using a PC, it's of advantage, but it's not so huge. But with 120, it was now going more like a conference. And that was a very broad field of participants. Companies based in Indonesia, different places, or in countries in the neighborhood, from Germany, also from the European network, participating there. As you've seen, maybe one of the supporting universities were also from Izmir. They did some advertisement for that. So there were also companies based in Turkey where people were joining, and from research institutions. So I think there's a list of companies they a bit try to gather. I have this not at the hand, but if you're interested, I can ask them precisely the names of companies who involved that. But there was from Asia, not the very big companies you maybe are thinking about, like the South Korean companies, or from Japan. It was more the middle-sized and smaller ones.
It sounds to me that there's a real need in the region for these kinds of activities you are offering.
I hope so, because when we try for funding our projects, it's often a need for this cooperation, especially in such fields between research and the industry. I mean, it's a strategy in the European Union and in Germany, and also in Indonesia, that results from research are going more quickly into products, more quickly helping the societies to have higher benefit, to have a higher growth. So yeah, we are depending also as scientists on such networks to make our ideas feasible.
Okay.
But let's see now the microphone is working, yeah? From
Professor, hang on, I have to look for the last. Professor Dr. Auch, now you can pose your question.
No, I don't have a question. I'm just very interested, as I have been in Freeport, Indonesia, in Papua, gold and copper mining. And this was also always a problem with the water and, of course, with the transport and so on. So I was very interested to hear about your work and scientific results. Thank you very much.
What exactly did you do there?
I'm a urologist. I gave some lectures also at the university in Jakarta, but mainly in Papua. I served by medical help, surgical in Asmat area in the southern part.
Interesting. Mm.
But I was also interested very early, already since 71. I was the first time in Indonesia looking for bird of paradise in Papua. So that's very completely different to your problems you were presented today, but very interesting seeing Freeport, Indonesia, having taken down a whole mountain for copper and gold. And this was always a problem also to wash it out and to clear the water.
I think this is a special topic of you, Professor Rüde, right?
Yes. When I did my workshop, it is coming from the experience about managing the environmental effects, and the discussion, especially with colleagues from Kalimantan, is indeed in the way that a lot of the lignite mines in Kalimantan are now in a closing period. In coming years, they will stop the production, will phase out some of the open pits, and now is a big challenge what to do about. And I learned that some of the international approaches are maybe not appropriate when we are looking about treatment plants, maybe very huge ones consuming a lot of space. That in Kalimantan, they are more looking on opportunities to do again forest on that, on such areas, and to restore these used areas, besides some lakes, which will be necessary because we digged out the lignite, so some material is missing. That means you have some lakes, but also to have more forest on the dumps. And that is quite a challenge to the right conditioning of the materials. And I know these big mining activities in Papua, not personally, sorry, but some of my colleagues, also from the hydrogeologists, worked in the early career in the mines in Papua, doing hydrogeology and modeling there. So for me, it's quite nice to hear, to meet some colleague who had worked in Papua personally. Again. Okay. My Batu was my largest mine on the way to the east. During this succession of islands, there's still a lot of me to go. But as I said, here in that point, we learned, especially in the 90s and the last decade in Germany, a lot about closing mines. And now I think that could be of help for the discussion in Indonesia, how to do it, how also to monitor and to manage such processes, also from administrative bodies. Here below Rhine embayment, where Aachen is in the vicinity, has an instruments in the 1950s that we have legally set up bodies for monitoring, managing the processes, and that is something which is a lesson we try also a bit to explain to our colleagues in Indonesia, which could be of help in the coming years when Indonesia will also see more and more mines in a closing period.
Definitely, yes. I have one last question. If we don't have any question from the audience, any more questions or comments from our guests? I hope my question is not stupid. Has Semarang stopped sinking? I was so shocked to hear that Semarang has, what did you say, the highest sinking rate in Southeast Asian cities. Is that right? And the measures have already started to be undertaken. So is there any effect to be seen already?
There is at the moment no measurable effect. What the city has started, they have installed a very huge, let's say, dam in the mountains, so that during high rains and storm events, not all the water is rushed at the same time. The idea is a bit to stop it in the mountains for some period so that some of the hills can already dewater and then release it later on. This is a system of, I think at the end there should be 3 of such dams. Personally, I know only one. Next is these huge canals which were installed and new polder areas, but all these are dealing in a way how to manage the amount of water which is flooding the city. To delay the floods, to have extra pumping, to have polder areas, which a new one is already installed by Dutch consultants in Semarang, a very huge one. To have more facilities to handle the water, but the approach to stop sinking means we have, for example, to stop drilling new wells. In some areas, there is some regulations by the city authorities that wells should not be drilled there. You know, it's the same as in Germany, you have rules and you need an enforcement. To set these rules indeed to practice, and that is something to struggle as the rules are a few years old, and I think we are not really in the procedure of the people, that you should not in these red zones, you should not install. The city has started to set up a new monitoring network for the groundwater pressure. So the groundwater head, but they have online data. This network, when I have last visited in 2019, was still not set up, but I should have to admit that I have this 1 year now in gap in precise knowledge, personal knowledge, what is the procedure on that, but the strategy is to make some monitoring, maybe with that monitoring to have a faster knowledge in which section not allowed dwellings are still undone, to stop that earlier. But again, this is a measure which is depending. If we stop this extraction water, we have to wait for the natural refilling of the aquifers, and that could go on for decades. Wow. The example of Tokyo is the stop of this decline was done in Tokyo by a very strict enforcement and artificial recharge into the aquifer. So by that they were not able to restore it, but at least to stop this development. And it was very, very strict. And you see, they had also, I think, a decade in need to set up everything and to be successful. The data were showing a stop of this adverse development.
Wow, that's a hard struggle.
It will be, for sure.
Okay, my questions are answered. If we do not have any more questions from the audience, then I would say thank you so much, Professor Dr. Rüde, for taking your precious time. I know you are very busy to be with us and to share your knowledge with us today. Thank you very much.